Welcome to the Web 101 session, Building HTML5 Apps. This is going to be an overview about the WebWorks platform, our underlying web platform, as well as building BlackBerry 10 look and feel into your application. So we're going to cover a number of different areas. We'll talk a bit about the underlying framework and how we're built on top of a WebKit rendering engine and everything that we built on top of that. Our HTML5 standards and so forth. And then we'll get into WebWorks and how you can leverage that platform to create applications for BlackBerry. And then onto UI paradigms as well. My name is Ken Wallace. I'm the product manager for WebWorks. And I'm actually going to hand it over first to Eli to cover the architecture side of things.
Thanks, Ken. Do we have a remote?
No, I'm your lovely assistant.
OK. So my name is Eli Fiedler. I'm the architect of the WebKit engine for BlackBerry and the web runtime. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that are going on behind the scenes when you bring your web content, your JavaScript and HTML and CSS and SVG and all of those good things and run them on a BlackBerry device. So this is the promise of web technology. This is why people like using web technology to build content, to build websites, to build web applications. It's because you build your content once, and the web, people who build for the web and people who use the web are already accustomed to doing device adaptation, to have very strong techniques for doing responsive web design and handling different screen resolutions and different input types and all these sort of things. So on mobile, we have a huge number of devices. This is a small subset of what most top-tier web applications will test on. And you can see that here, this is the BBC's site. And they have built one store space that more or less runs unmodified on a wide range of devices. And this is true of most well-designed web applications. So this is our strategy for our web platform. This is why we think that BlackBerry has the best web platform out there. The first is standard support. So we think it's very important that everybody moves forward together in supporting web technologies both on mobile and on the desktop. We are an active contributor in the W3C and trying to make sure that HTML5 and all of the related standards are good and are as widely supported as possible. So we when we shipped the BlackBerry Z10, have the highest HTML5 test scores of any browser out there. And that is a test suite that tests HTML5 and related features. So the score is great. We love having high scores. But a lot of these technologies on some other platforms exist but aren't implemented that well or that sort of thing. And we are always re-implementing our behind-the-scenes implementations of a lot of these features to make sure that they work really well on mobile. The second is we're very active in open source. And we believe that the development model that web developers have of view source and cut and paste has made the web the success that it is today. And so we make sure that we are contributing to the code bases of all of these popular projects to make sure that the entire web moves forward. WebKit is probably the biggest one, and that is our rendering engine. We are one of the biggest contributors to WebKit, and a number of top open source frameworks. The two examples we have up there, jQuery Mobile and Cordova. And we are also active participants in a number of other web technologies. And we'll be talking about those in a little bit more detail later. We also have first-class support for packaged web applications. So we think that it's a very compelling use case for web developers to take content that they've designed for their sites and bring that to the app experience. And so that's what our WebWorks runtime is all about, which enables native integration. So that allows you to use the technologies that you're accustomed to, writing all of your code in JavaScript and that sort of thing, but get access to platform APIs that aren't exposed to the web in the browser. For security reasons or standardization reasons or whatever else, we make sure that those are exposed when you're building an app. And push the boundaries of the mobile web as a platform. So we're always trying to build things that we can't yet, and so we have to expand the capabilities of the web platform and bring new APIs and support new standards technologies and support the implementation of those technologies in WebKit to make sure that the entire web moves forward. And when these contributions go into WebKit, they go into all the other platforms that you're developing for as well. So here's our HTML5 test score. We're at 485 right now. And I think that we intend to have a leading position on standard support for forever. This is ringmark. So ringmark is a web-based test suite to test capabilities of the web platform for building apps. It was originally built by Facebook, but it's now owned by a W3C community group. And we are the first vendor mobile platform to support Ring 1. So ringmark is divided into 3 rings, Ring 0, Ring 1, and Ring 2. And Ring 1 are all of the technologies that are required to build, I forget the exact percentage, but I think it's about 80% of applications out there. And we're the first vendor mobile browser to pass Ring 1. So these are some of the top new features that we've brought to the web platform with BlackBerry 10. Performance is always number 1. So it almost goes without saying that the performance of the web engine on BlackBerry 10 is far above anything that we've ever shipped, and certainly competitive with anything out there and leading in lots of areas. We have lots of new CSS support. We have the file system APIs. We have get user media support. We have IndexedDB, WebGL. We have a request animation frame implementation. And these are all relatively new technologies that are starting to become widespread across all of the different platforms. And we want to make sure that when people are building content that works, web content that works really well on all of the platforms, that it also works really well on BlackBerry. So how did we do it? This is our stack behind the web technologies. So at the bottom, we have our operating system based on Qnix. And then we have WebKit, which is our rendering engine. Actually, can you go to the next one? And we have a web platform. The web platform is a framework for running web code. So this is kind of the runner that's inside WebWorks. And as a WebWorks developer writing JavaScript, you would never actually care that about the code in the web platform, but it's the executable behind the scenes that runs your code and has the environment for your code. And then the browser application itself is a web app. We announced this last year, and everything that you see when you're running the browser application is written in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So we are trying to use our own web platform that you would use to build a WebWorks app and build our own browser application. It's also the foundation for Qnix Car 2. So you may have seen some announcements that BlackBerry and Qnix are now powering a huge number of cars out there for infotainment and that sort of thing. And the Qnix Car 2 front end is also a web app and is also built in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. We've built a number of native UI components and made them part of the web platform. So when you go to a website and you get a dialog, a JavaScript dialog, it looks like the first screenshot there. And that is implemented using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And you get those dialogs by just running your content on our platform. You can see the second one there. This is a sheet. And everything in there is built using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And on the third screenshot, you see our crosscut menu. So this is our context menu on the BlackBerry 10 platform. And when you run your web content inside a WebWorks wrapper, you also get the crosscut menu. And the crosscut menu provides you your hook to integrate with the rest of the system. So this is the browser. This is Wikipedia. And you can see that the browser Chrome is primarily at the bottom of the screen. That has the back button and the tab switcher and that sort of thing. Behind the scenes, go to the next one. This is the tab switcher. So you can see this is the actual interaction, how it looks like when you use the browser. So we've slid the content off. Obviously, the phone doesn't get wider, but it gets clipped. And then here are the tabs running in the background. Each of them is running in its own web container. We call it a web view. And you can see some of the browser Chrome here. The next one. And all of those are running inside web views. So all of these things are just different web pages that we've put in a nice stack and are running all together. And you can do this with your WebWorks application basically the same way. So I think Ken's up next to talk about WebWorks.
Yep. So Eli covered over the platform and how it all fits together, what the underlying web platform offers to you as developers using web content. WebWorks is what allows you to do basically two things. It allows you to take your content and package it into an application that you can distribute through BlackBerry World, that users can download, have an icon on their ribbon, they can launch it, that application feel that people are looking for these days. But it's all still web content. And it also provides a framework basically for accessing those native platform bits that are not provided by standards in HTML5. So we'll get a little bit into that here. This is really what the web flow for application developers looks like. Many people don't stick with just vanilla HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They use a lot of the common frameworks that are out there, including jQuery, Sencha, a whole bunch of frameworks that are out there. They'll use tools to debug, and I think that this, moving forward, is very much a key area for taking the web as a platform for mobile applications further. I think there's still a lot of opportunity to get more powerful tooling for application developers. But there's a lot of very interesting stuff out there now that you may not be aware of. A couple of the key ones that we use a lot is Web Inspector and Ripple, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in a bit. But they're actually providing a lot of very powerful debugging, performance, emulation tools today that you can use. Then people will use these tools, they will debug, they'll get their application together, and then they'll use packaging tools to build an application and deploy it. WebWorks is our proprietary method of taking this and creating a BlackBerry application. It's very much in the same vein as Apache Cordova. If you're not familiar with Cordova, you probably are more familiar with PhoneGap. PhoneGap was an open source project. The company behind it was purchased by Adobe. And when that purchase happened, they actually contributed PhoneGap into the Apache organization under Apache Cordova. So that's really the foundation for PhoneGap. And it's widely recognized as kind of the key cross-platform web framework available to create packaged apps. And we're actually heavily involved in Apache Cordova as well, and we'll talk a bit about that further as going forward. So this is really what you're looking to do. You're familiar with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you want to create an application that you can distribute through BlackBerry World. This is really something that we've had since BlackBerry 5, so it's evolved over time. The underlying frameworks that we used has changed, but on BlackBerry 10, really we've created this web platform that powers everything. And so everything you need to worry about is just your content that you've created with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and we take care of everything for you underneath. Next slide. So these are the two things that I talked about in terms of creating a container for your application and accessing native APIs. As I said, since BlackBerry 5, and this kind of equation between a Cordova and WebWorks, that's something that you can use to understand what we're talking about in terms of what WebWorks is. It's completely open source, WebWorks, so you can look at it under github.com/BlackBerry. You can see how it all fits together. This is in line with what we're trying to do. We're trying to be out in the open with everything we do with our web platform. That includes our WebWorks framework. You can see from our code how we create all of our platform hooks as well. So you can get access to BBM. You can see how we do that, and you can create your own extensions if you want. Take a look at the code and check it out. And we want to make sure that same performance and features as the browser. So you're not going to get any deficiencies in performance when you package your application. It's exactly how the browser is built. So as fast as the browser is, that's as fast as your content can be. Next slide. So this is just a couple of examples of what you're able to do with WebWorks. Our first step is always standards. So if there's an HTML5 standard for an API, we implement that in the browser first, and you use the HTML5 standard for it. So an example of that is the file system access. Prior to BlackBerry 10, our browser didn't have a file system API built in with the HTML5 spec. So we actually had a WebWorks file system API. As we got to BlackBerry 10, we actually didn't implement it again because the HTML5 standard was available to us. But there's a lot of very unique things to BlackBerry that we want to make sure you have access to as web developers, but don't have equivalent standards API for them. So obviously specific things like BBM, PIM. Right now there's some things coming around standards for things like contacts and such, but they don't really exist and aren't implemented yet. And you can also do your own custom extensions that I mentioned before. Next slide. I wanted to give you a quick example of what some of these APIs look like, and we're not going to get too in-depth here, but this is a very straightforward example of our invocation framework. We showed quite a bit of that in the keynote today, which you probably saw in terms of the share framework. Sharing is a specific example of invocation. Invocation is how applications interact with each other on the BlackBerry 10 system. It's a way to fire data off to another application and allow it to process it, give it back to you, that sort of thing. And this is just a very quick example, just passing in a URI to a web browser page, and it'll invoke the browser and go to that address, blackberry.com. Very, very straightforward. There's actually a lot more to the invocation framework. And we have a session tomorrow on that one, so if you want to get more information on how you do that with WebWorks, come by and check it out. And BBM, obviously this is a huge differentiator for BlackBerry as a BBM platform. And with WebWorks, you have access to it. You can integrate your application with BBM. And this is just the first command that you would do to register with the BBM social platform from your application, and that just ties the two together, your application and BBM. And that allows you to do things like post status updates to BBM profiles, invite other users to download your application. So it really powers that viral aspect of your application to really get other people to know about your application. Next slide. And now we'll jump a bit into the tooling aspect of things. So Web Inspector is a very, very powerful standard tool that's offered by all or most WebKit implementations. It works both on device as well as remotely. So you can actually load your content into a device or our simulator, open up a WebKit-based browser on your desktop, and actually inspect your content running on the device. And you can profile it, take a look at all the elements, look at your DOM tree. You can actually interact with it, so you can change values in the CSS and then actually see how it will render on the device with the new values. It's really, really powerful. You can even do JavaScript debugging, breakpoints and all that great stuff that you're used to in other languages. So this is something you should really take a look at. It's a really powerful tool to make sure that your app is performing properly and optimized. Ripple is a tool that is open source. We've had it available for a couple of years now. We're actually moving it to be an Apache project as well. So it's currently open source under our own GitHub area, but we're in the process of contributing it to Apache as a top-level project. The Cordova community is very interested in Ripple and actually have some integrations with it themselves. And we really think this can really move forward in some very interesting ways. But what it does is it allows you to use a development environment that many of you are familiar with in terms of editing your web content in whatever editor that you choose. We're not going to get into the discussion on which are the best, because everybody has a best one. But then you're very used to opening a browser and refreshing and seeing what your changes look like. And it's that quick iterative cycle that actually makes web development very interesting in a lot of different ways. But when you want to get into tooling, you don't necessarily want to, at least at the beginning, worry about a simulator or testing on device. What we've done is, with Ripple, is an extension into Google Chrome. And what it provides is an ability to mock data of APIs that wouldn't normally be in a Chrome browser implementation. So if you're interacting with our invocation framework, those APIs wouldn't be known by Google Chrome. But Ripple puts in a little layer that says, here's an API that's available to your content running in an iframe. So we load all of your application content into an iframe in the middle there and inject those APIs into the environment in the browser. So you can actually test and go further than just looking at the presentation layer of your application. You can actually interact and emulate API calls. So a very powerful tool, and it allows you to do that quick testing and go further than just UI layout and appearance. You can actually emulate API invocations as well. We actually, because it's open source and because we have this focus on openness in general and frameworks, we allow you to emulate not just BlackBerry WebWorks applications, but Apache, Cordova, and PhoneGap apps as well, right from the same tool. JAM323, there's a session, I believe, tomorrow about simulators in general, and we'll talk a little bit more about Ripple and our regular simulator in that session. So what's next in WebWorks? We've just published an update to our roadmap on WebWorks, and for the Q10 platform, which is really interesting, all of the keyboard kind of based interactivity stuff and the UI changes is all on device. So there's not going to actually be an update to the WebWorks SDK for Q10 because everything you need is already available to you in the OS update. You have the standard HTML5 on key press event, so you can actually listen for keyboard events and do what you want with those keyboard events. And we've implemented all of the UI changes. So there's a couple of things that change between Z10 and Q10. One of them being the context menu. So if you click and hold on content, you saw in the browser implementation that Eli showed you, there's a menu that comes in from the right, and shows you different actions that you can do, things like cut, copy, paste, open link in new page, that kind of thing. The layout of that changes between Z10 and Q10, and that's handled all for you by the platform. You don't have to worry about it. Instead of having a whole bunch of like 7 items on the right, for Q10, because the screen is smaller, it shows you 4 before it goes into an overflow kind of menu in implementation. So that's how it's handled for you, and it's available to you now. We, I believe this morning, posted an update to Ripple so that you can also emulate the Q10 in Ripple as well. What's really interesting is coming later, probably next week, is an update to the SDK. I said that there's not an update for Q10, but we are updating it to offer a couple of new APIs to you. One of the most significant ones is payment, so that you can integrate with our payment framework from WebWorks, so you can do in-app purchases, things like that. And we're also putting in a few small little missing bits from our BBM implementation as well. So that'll be available next week. But this third one is something that we'll talk a little bit more about in some of the other sessions, but Apache Cordova. So I mentioned that we are sort of a parallel project in many ways to Cordova and PhoneGap. We want to step away from being parallel and be integrated. So we're actually going to, in a few months, probably have a release where BlackBerry 10 WebWorks is actually built on top of Apache Cordova. So we're not going to be sort of a side project. We're going to be integrated into Cordova. PhoneGap's implementation will be the same as the Apache Cordova implementation, and WebWorks will be the same. What it's really about is making sure that we're not similar but separated. We are Apache Cordova underneath the covers, and that will allow a lot of the different frameworks that are being built up around Cordova, because that's sort of the center of the mobile web cross-platform environment. A lot of tools and frameworks are building up around that. And we don't want to be trying to compete with that. We don't want to be somewhat beside it. We want to be able to allow our developers to use all those same tools in the same ways that are coming up for you. So we're going to be looking to do that over the next few months. And I'll now pass it over to Tim to talk about how you can get BB10 UI on it.
I didn't get a chance to review these slides. Okay, sure. Okay. Yeah, so thanks, Ken. Yeah, I think that's a great point that Ken's making around our steps towards the Cordova. One of the ways that you can kind of think about it is that same sort of approach that we take for a browser and WebKit integration, is making sure that we're pouring all of our investment and findings that we are making back into the WebKit world so that it goes everywhere. We want to do the same thing with our WebWorks side. So by being able to be based off of the Cordova project and working intimately with that group and being able to bring any of the innovations that we find back in also helps the entire web community as well for packaging applications. So we want to make sure that we're all aligned, that we're helping to push the web forward along these. And the UI is another one of those areas. So we talked about a kind of 2 different things so far today, is around running content in the browser and running content out of the browser. And there's 2 different approaches to those different things, and there's 2 different scenarios that you want to think about for your applications. There's the Chrome or the browser that's around your content when you're running a regular web page, and then what do you want your application or your UI to look like there? Versus if you're in an application then the Chrome of the browser all goes away, and it's your application content is what's filling the screen. And so what does that now mean for navigation inside of your application? How do you want to make that look? And there's a lot of different approaches that you can take for these things. A lot of great toolkits that are out there, jQuery Mobile being one of the most popular ones. And these are toolkits that allow you to go as far or as little that you want to go for being able to create a customized UI for each different platform. So jQuery Mobile is a good example of where it's got, I'll call it a vanilla theme, kind of the theme out of the box that comes with it, that's a touch-based UI across multiple different operating systems. It's not specifically looking like iOS. It doesn't look exactly like Android. It doesn't look exactly like BlackBerry. It's kind of its own touch-based UI. But then it also has a theming capability on top of it. Sencha has the same sort of approach that it has, and a few other different frameworks go the same way, where there's a theming approach where you can make it now look more like the actual operating system that you're running on. Some people like going this extra step, and then you can even go a further step of using some of the customized controls that are available for those different operating systems to make it look very much and feel very much like a native application on that platform. And how far you want to go down that spectrum of looking more like that operating system is really, it comes down to your application and your needs. If you're trying to maintain a very strong brand look and feel across multiple different operating systems, then you're going to want your own look and feel. One of the things that we've found, and you'll see us encouraging it again in our keynote this morning, is that we've found that applications, and we've heard this from a lot of different analysts and stuff that we've talked to, is applications that take on the look and feel of the operating system that they're running on tend to have more success with their end users. And in a lot of cases, it's because that end user knows how to use that operating system. They know the interactions, they know how it looks and feels. And so when the application looks like that environment, that interaction just flows over into that application. So this has been something that's been typically a little bit challenging in the web to kind of get this fidelity look and feel. But this is where these different JavaScript frameworks come into play. So maybe we'll... So for BlackBerry 10, right, we've got a lot of key tenets that we've got. We've got this kind of beautiful, this social and integrated. Ken touched on a lot of the different things that you can do from that social and integrated aspect. We've got APIs that will get you down into the core levels of the operating system if you want to access this stuff. Simple share and integration frameworks for invoking stuff out there. So if you want to share something on Facebook, you send it down into the invocation framework. It pops up. What are your share targets? You say Facebook, Twitter, whatever thing, anything that's actually subscribed to that share framework, it'll just go through the system and go through there. So there's a lot of really cool things. But then we've also got some really interesting UI paradigms that are different from other different operating systems. Yeah, we have the toolbar at the bottom, but it's still a little bit different. It's not a toolbar at the top like at the other ones. It's got the concept of tabbing and these tab overflows, actions and action overflows. And there's reasons behind why you would use these different things, or context menus like what Eli was mentioning before. So these are some really interesting, unique BlackBerry interactions that you can bring in to be able to bring in that BlackBerry, what we believe is a very beautiful, elegant, flowing experience for applications. Next one. So along these lines, right, we've got a few different things that we talk about when we're building a BlackBerry 10 application. One is around that kind of flow, that is swiping in, using gestures, having different elements come into the scene when you need them to. And the reason behind a lot of that flow and why we have these unique elements is really around the second element, the third one on there, around content is king. Cluttering your entire UI around Chrome and options and settings and buttons and toolbars and all of these different sorts of things can tend to get in the way of user interaction. And we want the screen that you're viewing to be very targeted to around the actions, so that what you have on your toolbars and what you have for your interaction is very focused and targeted on the content that you're seeing on the screen. Extra things that aren't used as often or less likely be used on your screen come in these other different areas of overflows of tabs or actions. So it's around making the content that you're dealing with at that time the king of what's on the screen, and using as much of the screen as possible to be able to get that across for your application. It kind of flows in with that cinematic experience and really using as much of the display as possible. Right, so these are a lot of the different things that you see with our core controls, bringing this stuff, communication and share. All these things come together, and you start to see a little bit about why our UI was designed the way that it was, right? And a lot of the things that you see with the one-handed, thumb-based use of these things, and that's why the toolbar is at the bottom. It's, there's a lot of pieces on the usability aspect of the way that we've been researching how people use phones to be able to make it as most efficient as possible. So the moments of charm is some little different interesting things. The camera one's always a favorite one to show with, Alec making silly faces. But you'll just see different little things. And it's stuff to take into consideration in your application. Little things like Easter eggs, like when your device is booting and you're seeing the scroll bar go around. If you press the screen, it fades out and you see a percentage. And just little things that you didn't expect to have happen. Glows when we're touching different things on the controls and stuff. Just to give it, not over the top, but just an extra little bit of, oh, neat, that's part of your application. So we always encourage people to think about some of those, not to go overboard and go, wow, look, I've got 70,000 animations when I touch this button. But just giving it that extra little bit of touch. So demo time, and of course I don't have a demo ready here. I can maybe, actually, I don't know if I've got a jQuery mobile demo, but I do have a web demo. We do, but my Wi-Fi looks like it's went fantastically bad at the moment. Oh, just a second. I just need to get on the right Wi-Fi here. Am I upside down? Yes, I am. Oh, what's a good one to bring up? So Grazia is an example. I think they brought it up this morning in the keynote as well. Is an example of a web-based application that can look exactly like BlackBerry 10, right? Using web frameworks and being able to create that look and feel, being able to get things like your tab overflows, being able to bring those across, being able to get your same kind of animations and transition effects. So all of these things are all possible. Hit and share to open up the share framework to share across different things. What do we got here? We got some NFC sharing tags that I got set up on my device. Right? So all of this stuff is available through the web frameworks and the web toolkits to create a really rich BlackBerry 10 user experience. Right, so all of this stuff is available in jQuery Mobile. Jason's got some different sessions going on how to build jQuery Mobile applications. Also has some labs around jQuery Mobile for building these things. And we actually have a panel tomorrow morning, bright and early at 9:30 for those that want to get up and good to go, where we're having a panel with a bunch of the different representatives from web frameworks, whether jQuery Mobile representation, Sencha representation, other different community representation, to be able to talk about some of the different challenges and things that you might want to consider when you're picking up one of the different frameworks. So as you can see, we've got lots of really great performance across the different items that we have in our application, switching back and forth between tabs. We've got our grid views and stuff. What's this one? Oh, there we go. We got some more content that's coming in here. So really quick and snappy performance, all hardware accelerated animations. So these toolkits are constantly being tweaked, and we are committing and contributing back into these toolkits to try to make them as performant as possible on BlackBerry 10. So we can switch back over there. So if we go to the next slide. So some of the key items that you'll get from, for example, the labs that you're seeing for jQuery Mobile in the session that'll be going on tomorrow are things like our actions and buttons and tabs. And the action bar is kind of one of those key navigation aspects of BlackBerry 10. You can intermix tabs and buttons and overflows and manage the information in your application in a really nice way that's all accessible by one thumb. And being able to, again, enforce that content is king. These toolbars are really, really packed, but you'll even see in some of our examples on BlackBerry 10, the toolbar has got one button on the bottom. and then an action overflow that's got the extra 7 actions that you would do. But the most common thing that you do, that your user is always going to press that one button, well, why not make it prominent on the toolbar to be able to get access to it? So action bars and overflows and these things are really important around the DNA from a BlackBerry 10 user experience. So here's a quick code example of what it's like to put an action bar together. Literally create your footer that's in here for jQuery Mobile. You say that it's an action bar area. You've got your tabs, and you've got an action for a button. You put that in there, and all of a sudden, now you've got an action bar at the bottom of your screen. So these toolkits do a ton of the work for you. Try to minimize the amount of JavaScript and the DOM that you need to create that exact same experience for the platform. And that literally will draw a bar with a tab and a button at the bottom, right? They take care and do that styling for you. So there's a question there.
You want to two different jQuery on my computer?
So
you have to start with the jQuery?
So we're talking jQuery Mobile. There's standard jQuery Mobile. This is a BlackBerry 10 theme on jQuery Mobile. So the same way that you implement different themes, you can pick a theme for jQuery Mobile, you pick our BlackBerry 10 theme, right? So now our action bar, we style what we can based off of what's already in those toolkits. In some cases, there might be something very specific to BlackBerry 10 where it's a custom theme that we do for some of those different items. But we will take the standard items and theme them to look like a BlackBerry 10 look and feel. Okay, so we pop to the next one. So action bar and overflows. So the overflows are some of the things that we've talked about. The same thing with the context menu. We've tried to build all of these things in here to be able to give you that environment. So again, these overflow aspects are things, to your point, as a custom compared to what just the toolbar does. Right? So a regular standard toolbar in a lot of these toolkits don't have this concept because it's not on other different operating systems. So this is where we add customized extra things to these themes to provide that experience to the device. So image lists, again, just really popular things. How do we style them, make them look good, make them look like the BlackBerry 10 image list that we've got on there. Same thing with the Q10 device. As it comes out, list items and font sizes and these things are slightly different, just to try to make things more compact and more readable on the different screen resolutions. So the toolkits themselves take on responsive design to be able to take your DOM and style it into something that's going to be more usable on that actual operating system. So this is the power that you get out of these toolkits by using the built-in functionality so that you don't have to do the heavy lifting and CSS work yourself. So again, arrow lists, we try to add anything that's on there, just kind of common UI elements that you will find, bring that styling in to make them look and feel BlackBerry 10 like. Just next one. So here's an example of doing a list that's on here. It's an arrow list. Again, it's a jQuery Mobile example. You put this in there, and each line item is your list item, and all of a sudden it's styled to take a look at your lists. And the cool things that we do in these toolkits is we do things like when you design your screen, we'll put the content in a div with overflow using special CSS to make that overflow scroll kinetically and smoothly and use hardware acceleration for doing that stuff. So this is kind of the neat things that by putting the themes in and knowing the background and the history inside of the BlackBerry stuff is we can make it perform really well and make it look very much like mobile. So grid list was an example you'd saw on the sample here. This is one that you'll see in a lot of the different media applications on BlackBerry 10, being able to choose your different images, lay them out into different areas, so you can choose that. And it's usually primarily used as like a drill down menu to be able to get to more details about some of the different items that are on there. So you can do like a 16:9 or a square-based image and lay them out on here, and we'll continue to keep updating these grids to be able to do more and more functionality. So again, here's an example for a grid view. Really, they've got different rows. You can put headers upon the rows and then different items that are inside of those rows. And whenever you want to deal with an on-click, you just assign an on-click handler to your item, and then off you go from when someone clicks on it. So sliders again. So these are an example of a control of when there's an existing control, like a range control that's available, we take that and we style it. So jQuery does it, and we theme that functionality so that it deals with all the touch interaction, the glows, the highlights, everything that's on there to make it look exactly like the native controls. So this is an example. We try to do this on checkboxes, radio buttons, these different things. And you think, well, radio buttons, why wouldn't you just, in the browser, make them look like BlackBerry 10? Well, and that's where you get into this difference between the styling for a mobile application versus possibly something that's in the browser. If the browser were to make all of the core controls look like BlackBerry 10 and your website didn't want blue controls, when you're going to clash with regular web content. So by being able to use toolkits and deal with standards, there's some new standards emerging around being able to stylize some of those different controls. It allows you to give a more app-like feel while still allowing regular websites to render as they would expect. So again, here, radio buttons in this example. It's like, well, wait, okay, great, coloring on radio buttons. Well, if you use radio buttons on BlackBerry 10, you'll realize that when you move between radio buttons, they do what I call bleeding. You'll see the dot actually animate up and down through the different controls, and you'll see it slide and move up and down between the radio buttons instead of just being clicked, so it knows which direction it's going and doing the animation. So these are the different sorts of small little nuances, again, those kind of little moments of charm of little pulses and things like that that these toolkits will bring in for you. All right, next. Dropdowns is another example of, again, well, why not just do the regular dropdowns and bring this kind of functionality into web content? Well, BlackBerry 10, you hit a dropdown, it slides all the content below it down. It's a user interaction that we felt is a better user experience than popping up dialogues or trying to do different things like that, is that you can scroll through these things. So these have been brought in as well. They're bringing the animations, move your content down, scroll them back up into focus. This kind of functionality is all part of the different toolkits. Yeah, let's go next one. Okay, yeah, so pill buttons and buttons again, just more theming, being able to make them look and feel like BlackBerry 10 stuff. This stuff is, again, really, really simple markup to be able to get these. And you don't have to go, well, what's the shade, what's the gradient from top to bottom, and draw these things. The toolkits will pick them up. Again, do the animations for the sliding in between the different pill buttons too. And progress indicators got different states. Again, just stylizing the existing HTML5 controls to be able to make these things look the way that they should. We'll go next one. Checkboxes, again, doing the pulse styling, the existing ones that are there, and you'll get the look and feel that you want for BlackBerry 10. Toggle buttons, again, another one. This is, I think we have an example if we move to the code next in here that shows, oh, we didn't have the code, okay. So for these ones, again, there's existing toggle buttons in jQuery Mobile, and we just restyled them, where you can change the text on them, activity indicators. So we're taking all of the core UI stuff and making it available for you if you want to put those into your applications. So, Ken, did you want to tackle this one, or I can tackle it? I'll go through it. So one of the different things that you want to take into consideration, and you'll see, and it was part of the stuff that they talked about this morning for the Cascades aspect, is the Q10 itself is an OLED screen. And this is a scenario where the more white that you have on the screen, you can get into, and light colors, you can get into burn-in on the display itself. And some of the things you might want to consider is your theming of controls and stuff to be one of the darker themes. So there's both a light and a dark theme for different controls on the device. So you might want to take some of those things into consideration as well for your application, just from a power consumption and burn-in aspects if your app is up a lot and has fairly stationary content. And so for being able to deal with the 720 by 720, there's a lot of different ways that you can deal with it through CSS media queries and automatically calculate those different things. But one of the main things here is just making sure that you test, right? So we've got Ripple available, we've got the simulators available. Make sure that it looks the way that you expect it to look. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do where traditionally for tall touch screens, you might have a lot of fixed areas with scrolling below them. You might want to reconsider on whether or not you want those areas to still be fixed, or should it scroll with the rest of the content of the screen. So these are the kind of things that you want to take into account from that responsive design to ensure that, again, content is king. You want to make sure that you've got a really usable environment. Same thing goes with your action bars and how you lay those out. Being able to think about how you can have that one source space that will really address the two different form factors but keep that same kind of feel for your application. Okay.
Okay, so you saw lots of examples of the jQuery Mobile BlackBerry 10 theme, and we certainly think it's a great toolkit. jQuery Mobile has a very specific style of writing your application, and for those of you who've built web content, you've probably seen what jQuery looks like. If you're more of a JavaScript developer, then the Sencha toolkit, we think, has a very different style, and it's much more JavaScript oriented. And we have also built a BlackBerry 10 theme for Sencha. So from just a quick summary, Sencha Touch is a toolkit for building mobile web applications. So it's specifically targeted at high-end devices with high-end experiences. So it has the runtime. The runtime is based on the XJS project. It's a primarily JavaScript framework. And with the runtime, you also get a suite of tooling, desktop tooling for building your application. That's really awesome. And Sencha as a company as well is available to provide support services and consulting. So they're a full-service company. Around the jQuery mobile ecosystem, there's a number of smaller partners who do that, but there's no one owner of jQuery mobile like there is with Sencha. Sencha Touch 2.1.1 was released this week, I think today maybe. And it has theme and performance improvements. So it specifically introduced the BlackBerry 10 theme. That means that if you have a Sencha Touch application, you upgrade to 2.1.1, and you get the theme selector. You can turn on the BlackBerry 10 theme. Your Sencha Touch application will look like BlackBerry 10. The next release, which is 2.2, will deliver BlackBerry 10 as a core platform. So that means that when you get the default set of themes, it will include BlackBerry 10. There will be more performance improvements for the BlackBerry 10 WebKit port and for running in the browser and WebWorks runtimes. But it's a great toolkit, and if we find that it's very popular with developers who are looking for a lot of tooling and support. So it's definitely another option to get that BlackBerry 10 experience in your web application. And here is just a screenshot, I think, of the BlackBerry 10 theme running in Sencha container. So this is an application. There's no browser Chrome or anything like that. It has an action bar, and it has some of the buttons, and all of the other controls as well are available. You want to take this?
Sure. So that's really it for this session. This is a couple of links that you'll find very useful as you move forward with WebWorks. The main site is developer.blackberry.com/HTML5. WebWorks SDK download link. Samples. We actually have put a lot of focus with BlackBerry 10 on making sure that we've provided all the tools that you guys need to build apps. And sample code is obviously a huge bonus for people. And we've got a large number of WebWorks samples out there now that you can take a look at. And they're very task-oriented or user action oriented. So we've got a sample on BBM. We've got some samples on how you can integrate your app with third-party services like Foursquare. We've got samples for the Invoke framework, BBM, everything. So take a look at it, and you can mix and match these things and build up your application from sample code. And our jQuery mobile theme that we talked about is at that link in our GitHub area as well. And I think that's it.
Yeah, we'll open it up for questions, I guess.
Oh, sorry, the mandatory additional slides for all of our sessions. Mobile conference guide, take a look at it. Complete your session surveys, please. And remember that we have the appreciation event tonight in the Europa foyer, so we can have a more relaxed, casual conversation if you want at that point. But we've got some time for questions, I think, as well now. So no mics this time, so I think you can just yell it out. Questions.
And we got a question at the back.
Will the Sencha theme ever look like the jQuery theme?
I think not directly. So Sencha has their own set of components that they've built up. So they're bringing our appearance concepts into their framework as opposed to jQuery seems to have a little bit more commonality with the UI components that we have in BlackBerry 10. Sencha has their own very distinct framework of UI components, so color selection, things like that applies into the Sencha framework. But they want to keep their kind of consistent look and feel as well across the different platforms. So it's a bit of a mix and match there. Do you have anything else there?
A very specific example is they have a control that is a picker at the bottom with like kind of a slot machine type interaction. And we have no such component in BlackBerry 10 on any of our other applications, but that's available on any Sencha theme. So they've made it so the colors match, they made it so the highlights match, but it still looks like their slot machine picker.
What about the toolbars and the icons and everything?
Yeah, so with Sencha Touch 2.2, they're going to be tweaking the theme a lot to make sure that it's closer to pixel accurate. Right now there's a couple of cases where the sizes of things aren't quite exact, but certainly, I mean, the theme is just JavaScript, so you can change it yourself if you wanted to, and Sencha is also making changes to make it a little bit more pixel accurate. There's a couple cases where it's not quite on today.
BlackBerry mobile app, and I'm trying to see in BlackBerry team. The theme will show up in the BlackBerry team, or will be the same as we see in iPhone?
So you're asking how do you apply the BlackBerry 10 theme to be able to get it? So we have, if you go to our GitHub repository, we're hosting our BlackBerry 10 theme there. So it's just standard. You get the latest jQuery mobile. You get our theme and apply our theme to it, and you'll get it'll look like BlackBerry 10. So your existing jQuery mobile application. Okay.
Because if I see it in an iPhone, it will be BlackBerry team.
Yeah, so in your app, and what you include into your content is your theme and the jQuery mobile. You could write your own code that does your own loader, that you would include the themes from all different OSs and dynamically load that in yourself if you wanted to, right? So you could have one source base that goes everywhere, but in most cases, we usually see people still do certain tweaks for each different operating system, even if they are using something like PhoneGap to package it for multiple different platforms. But if you are doing a one package through something like PhoneGap build, and you've got your different themes in there, you're going to probably want to dynamic, detect the user agent or something inside there and change your OS themes. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, the way that your app looks is up to you.
I thought you can have BlackBerry can switch.
Yeah, most of the frameworks have some way of dynamically detecting which platform they're running on. So there's already a hook, and then if you want to switch themes based on the platform you're running on, or you want to do whatever else based on the platform you're running on, there is already usually a JavaScript method that you can query what platform you're running on, and the toolkit will take care of detecting through the appropriate way.
The toolkits themselves typically try to keep themselves as small as possible to not add in platform-specific stuff, and so that way it's up to you to say, I want this platform-specific stuff. So that's why they don't bundle it all into one big toolkit. Any other questions? Sure, we have one at the back.
How about the licensing that Sencha built out? Is it free or for us to sell that?
So Sencha licensing, I don't think you're going to get any of us to be able to speak really intelligently around Sencha licensing. They have two different models of licensing. They have an open source license and they have commercial licenses. So it depends on which license you pick and how you go about doing that. It depends. It's on what you're doing, what license. I think theirs is a GPL3, is it, for their open source one? So you're going to want to take a look at what those open source licenses tell you how you can distribute your stuff using the open source license versus the commercial license. They have free commercial licenses and they have paid commercial licenses. So they've got a bunch of different options for you. So you're probably best to engage with them on how and what you can do with those different licenses.
I think there are some people here from Sencha in the partner space, in the
Yeah.
JAM space, and you can talk to them.
Yeah. Sure.
So in one of the benefits of QML is you can make cards which can be important to other apps. Is that possible when you're writing a web app?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, my session tomorrow on PIM and invocation, I actually will show you a bit about how you can create a card in a WebWorks app and allow other applications, whether it's another WebWorks app or a Cascades app, or wherever can invoke your application and bring a card in, do whatever your card offers, and go back out. So yeah, WebWorks apps are fully integrated into the invoke framework, and you can do that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're pretty much at time then. Yeah, feel free to catch us outside or at some of the other different events. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we'll catch you outside.